as leaders in this industry, it's stepping back and thinking, how can I have moments of empowering their autonomy, competence, and belonging? And when I was leading in the trade-based industry, that would often come back to even our first year, day one apprentice, asking, when you're out there, look for ways to improve things.
It's not enough to just be an architect, a creative professional. The real question is, what are you doing? How are you making an impact if you don't know how to answer that question, or you feel too overwhelmed, stressed out, or burned out to even think about it? I'll help you get beyond the status quo trap in our profession to get inspired again. If you're ready, let's get architecting. Hey, Bright Lights, welcome back to Architecting. Today, I have a guest who I'm super excited to hear from. Hacia Atherton is a high-performance culture strategist. She's also a speaker and a leadership advisor and the author of the book, Billion Dollar Blind Spot. Welcome, Hacia.
So excited to be speaking to you and your audience today.
Me too. Not only is what you work on and help people with really exciting and compelling and so needed in the corporate world today, but you have roots in the AEC industry. So I would love it if you could start out by just telling us a little bit more about what led you to a career like this after you started more in a plumbing company.
Yeah, so I'm very proud to be a fifth generation plumbing family over in Australia. So my family came over from England and started up our plumbing company, which over time diversified into manufacturing medical infection control equipment. And that's what they currently do. They manufacture, install, and service that equipment. And it's an industry that I had loved for a very long time, sitting on the sidelines, always getting involved in the business side of it. And just before I moved to America, I had the privilege of being interim CEO of a plumbing company that was merging with an electrical company at the time as well. So that was a really great experience. I love the plumbing trade. I think it is so important because without clean air and clean water, we don't have thriving societies. Very proud to be part of fifth generation plumbing family.
Yeah, and I think it gives you a little bit of perspective into a lot of the issues that women face in a male-dominated industry.
Yes, it is. It's very challenging for a lot of reasons. I know myself when I had been learning on the tool skills, whether that was welding or more plumbing based skills, doubting myself because I was a woman. There was an amazing time in my family factory where the welding helmet came off, the tears came, and Johnny, who was the welder teaching me how to weld, said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I just can't do this because I'm a girl." And he said, "Hacia, the welder and the metal have no idea if you're a girl or a guy. You're the one that's just told yourself. And you're a human learning a new skill, and that's why you're struggling." And that was just such a ground moving moment for me around how I was seeing the value I could bring to a trades-based industry and holding myself back. And then I think that's a tone that's often thread throughout society, that women, for whatever reason, not strong enough, not whatever, can be tradespeople. But I know when I was the CEO of the plumbing company, we had 5 women in our team, which was quite a high percentage for a plumbing business. And they were fantastic at their jobs. They loved it. Clients loved them, just as there was many fantastic men on the team as well. So it really goes to show the trades has no gender. It's a human's job and humans can thrive in the trade.
The limits are the ones, like you were saying, that we put on ourselves. You really had some breakthrough moments to go from a finance kind of a background and a trades kind of a background to doing the work that you're doing today. Some core truths you realized about the human spirit through your own experiences.
Yes, very much so. And that really comes down to, often in businesses, we get so caught up in the strategy and the execution and the numbers and the data. And we so often overlook the human element of business and putting the human back into humanity. And we've got HR departments, but they kind of become the internal police, and everyone's very scared of them, or they're the ones that are doing all of the disciplining and everything. So, through my own experience, I actually had a life-threatening horse riding accident. So, my young horse reared up and I fell off and she landed on top of me. And from that, I got completely crushed, 6 months in hospital. Doctors weren't sure if I was ever going to walk again in any meaningful way. And I got very depressed, very anxious in hospital, and got introduced to positive psychology. And what really started to shift and change was how the whole medical team and myself engaged with each other. And that's a team, just as it is a team in any workplace, through this lens of positive psychology and looking at the challenges that we were facing in a way of learning. How can we learn from, we trialed one form of medication, or I trialed one form of therapy and it didn't work. So instead of feeling that we failed, I really learned the concept of failing forward. Well, this is just more information about how we can do the next thing, or adapt or tweak or do anything like that. And that was a real moment where I realized we can thrive in the utmost adversity. I couldn't walk, I couldn't sit for a lot of that time. I was on IV drips, I couldn't even go to the bathroom. I needed a medical team to help me do that. But I could psychologically be very successful in that moment. And that's kind of where everything that I do now was born, in that hospital bed.
Yeah, the reframing of a situation to see where's the growth opportunity, or what have I learned that can help me do it better next time, is so key to success. I think way too many people take that first failure as the sign from God that they should just immediately cease and desist, and they abandon themselves and then blame all the circumstances around the failure.
And it's a lot easier to think of an excuse why not to try again than have the bravery to go, how do I make that next attempt 1% better? And that's what I've really learned through both my leadership and my recovery in hospital, is if we can show up and just be 1% better the next day, over the year or 6 months or 90 days, the compounding effect of that mindset of just reflecting of what that day looked like, or what that failing looked like, and what's that little tweak I can do to try again. It's that growth mindset of seeing the failure as feedback, not as finite.
I love that. Yes, it's just one more way that won't work, or something that you could take away from it. And so many times we don't view it that way. You talk about how the current workplace is still based on models from the Industrial Revolution, thinking that very much had gatekeepers in any kind of a workplace setting. I think that shows up a lot in our AEC industry as what I like to call systemic codependency, where we're all conditioned to behave and relate with one another in a way that's very toxic, to not have the confidence that we can do the work we really want to do, and instead have very lack-based thinking about the work that we quote unquote have to do, and what dues we have to pay, and all of that. So how does the work you do help people to start to question that status quo, and even more importantly, take the steps to move past it?
So all human beings have three basic pillars to our psychological well-being. One is our need for autonomy, the other is competence, and the other is the sense of belonging. And what often happens, especially in the trade-based industries, when it comes to autonomy, that gets stripped away because you're told what to do, you're given a plan, you've got to execute it in a time. It's very stripped back as well. And then the early stages of a tradesperson career, that competence is extremely low because you're learning all the time, all the time. So as leaders in this industry, it's stepping back and thinking, how can I have moments of empowering their autonomy, competence, and belonging? And when I was leading in the trade-based industry, that would often come back to even our first year, day one apprentice, asking when you're out there, look for ways to improve things. So if the technology platform that we're using is really clunky to check into a client's site, let me know. If the way that we're teaching you how to do backflows or something is just not landing well, give us that feedback so that we can then improve how we're teaching. So that's giving even a first year apprentice the autonomy to raise their voice of how can we improve this system? How can we improve how we're engaging with clients? Just because they're a first year apprentice doesn't mean that they can't have the innovative thinking to be able to improve your business. So as much as sometimes we need that hierarchical level to be able to project manage and execute on things, where we can take all of that hierarchy out and give everyone an equal respected voice around how we co-design the culture of the business, the processes of the business. Because at the end of the day, as the CEO sitting at the top of the tree, you're not the one checking into client sites or getting your compliance documents and things like that. So the people that are actually doing that, if you can empower them to give you the feedback of how do we improve that and make that more efficient and effective, it very much improves the culture, takes away that toxicity, but also takes away some of the roadblocks that create the toxicity because the people at the top are putting all this pressure to get the job done on time, on budget. But there's this massive roadblock that no one's talking about, and they're all trying to navigate around it. The stress is piling up, the conflict's piling up. Where if we step back and create space for those really open conversations, you could remove a roadblock that then removes the stress that's being created.
Yeah, so many times that lack of trust or misplaced expectations or fear of admitting that you need help or don't know or looking bad really holds everything back. So it's not just bad for the person, but it's bad for the project and bad for the team.
Yeah, exactly. And if we're not learning and growing, we're dying, we're going backwards. As leaders in the industry, we really need to champion that mindset of we don't know everything. We need to hear the voices of our employees and our colleagues so that we can understand how to improve processes and systems, but also improve ourselves as well. As your workforce changes, whether that is getting a younger generation involved into your workforce or different gender or race or religion, as a leader, the workforce is always shifting and becoming so dynamic, as well as the workforce educating themselves. So we always need to be checking in with what do they know that I don't know, and what do they don't know that I can educate them, and start having this two-way flow of mentorship within organizations. And I've very much done that with some of the times when I've been leading and there's a very younger generation, the 18, 19-year-olds, they communicate in a very different way. So some of the words that I use for them actually is a bit offensive or comes across as a passive aggressive. So I will always check in with them and say, I know your generation has developed a whole new form of language. I need to be educated on what all of this means. So please correct me if I'm using a terminology that doesn't quite land or feels disrespectful and you would like me to use something in a different way. Let me know, because I don't know what I don't know. And I think as leaders, we really need to anchor ourselves in feeling confident in not knowing what we don't know.
Now, a lot of people have tried to solve this in the last 5 or 6 years, especially with the idea of DEI training. There's a whole cottage industry out there around that. But why isn't that moving the needle for us?
From the research and everything that I've looked into, the programs are all built from good intent and very much built from that educational piece of what the minority group is needing. Sometimes we're missing a very critical step, which is getting the majority ready for that information and getting them in a state of psychological openness without feeling they're going to come into these programs and be victimized or blamed or they're the problem or all of these other kind of things. So especially in my industry where I've been getting more women into a very male-dominated industry, what I realized with some of these programs, it was actually creating a lot of resentment amongst the men because they didn't have a safe space to actually say, we feel a little bit uncomfortable. We don't know the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do with the Me Too movement. We're now really concerned about how we engage with a female. Riding along in a truck with a young female next to me all day, every day, I'm very nervous about that. What if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing? When I stop off to get a coffee, do I buy her a coffee too? All of these questions the men I've worked with have had, but none of the D&I projects that I've seen implemented actually created safe space for men to put those questions on the table, discover the answers, and get the education and the tools to be able to address their fears and discomforts and uncertainty. So what happens is microaggressive behavior, or they shut down and don't engage with the female because they're too scared to do the wrong thing, which actually creates its own issues in itself because the female feels like she's being isolated from the pack as well.
Yeah, I can definitely see that people are so afraid of doing the wrong thing that they just avoid. And they feel like if I just don't interact, I can't make a mistake. But now you are cheating other people from the opportunity to work with you, learn from you, etc. And you aren't benefiting by the perspective they would bring.
Yeah. So the first step whenever you're implementing any form of diversity and inclusion training is checking in. Do you have strong psychological safety with your current team? Can you have those difficult, uncomfortable, challenging conversations with your team first? And if so, let's create that safe space for them to get all of their fears and concerns that are justifiable out on the table without them feeling victimized or ashamed for asking the question or putting forward their concern about the change that's about to happen in the business. And then when you do start diversifying your workforce as well, comes back to that co-creation. Not every woman wants to be treated the exact same way. There's some women that need certain things. For example, I'm a very confident woman, so I can speak up in a room and I don't need anyone to create space for me. I've led teams where women are quite nervous about speaking up, so they'll text me or they'll WhatsApp me going, I have something to say, and then I'll call on them in the meeting, but they're not comfortable enough speaking up without me creating space for them. Both women deal with the same situation of speaking up in a meeting very, very differently. But I just said to her, if you want to speak in the meeting and you don't feel comfortable speaking up or finding the right time because she was the only other woman in the room, just text me and I will call on you.
That's a good approach. But I also think that sometimes being the stronger, dominant woman can backfire on you too. You know, we get put into that too much, not enough conundrum. And at some point, you just have to say, I'm not for everybody, but I'm going to show up the way I need to show up and say what I need to say.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes from understanding, I guess, the strength of your voice, learning how to use your voice, literally in tonality, in everything like that. Working in a male-dominated environment, I've done a lot of understanding around tonality and body language and different things like that. So I could put forward quite a forceful opinion, but not deemed in a bitchy or aggressive way, which was just understanding the dynamics of body language and tonality.
Another interesting dynamic, and I've experienced this myself, is when you are entry level or a few years into your career, oftentimes people do want to mentor you, and it is very heartfelt and very beneficial. But then you start to get to a point where you're pulling up even with them or even poised to eclipse them, and the dynamic changes. All of a sudden, instead of being happy for you or seeing your success as a little bit of a reflection on their own success as a mentor, they then try to hold you back.
Yes, I've experienced that and I've seen that a lot. When now I start any mentoring relationship with anyone else or I enter a mentoring relationship, I'm very conscious of making sure that dynamics are even from the beginning. So if someone reaches out to me and wants to mentor me, I say that's absolutely fine, but I also want to provide feedback and mentor you in return, because at the end of the day, I've got some skill sets and knowledge and experience that you may not have come across, even though you may be more senior in your career than me. what I learned is as soon as you are in those mentoring relationships, try and take the hierarchy out of it and make it more of that co-colleague style of mentoring. You're offering advice, they're offering advice, you're helping them, they're helping you. So as you start to rise to their level or go above, you're already got a relationship where you were equal in how you were mentoring each other.
I like that a lot. And it's kind of a relief for the person who's the mentor because sometimes you feel like you have to have all the answers when none of us do, let's be honest.
Exactly. And so I've got mentors again who are way ahead of me in life and career, but they'll call me up and be like, hey, can I run something past you? We're doing a marketing campaign that's relevant to the millennial generation. Can we see if this lands on you? Or if you've got any feedback for it. So again, that's from someone that's 20 years, 25 years older than me. So understands I grew up in a different time, but wants to run something past me before it goes out to market. And that's because I established that relationship with, I've got something to offer you, you've got something to offer me. Let's be mentors to each other.
And that's the dynamic shift that you were talking about earlier is that co-creation, which is diffusing competition, which is all about lack-based thinking.
Exactly, exactly. We don't thrive in that lack-based thinking as that where we get that dog eat dog world and take, which is draining for everyone. It's fatiguing. There's so much invisible labor in those kind of environments because you're always thinking of what's the next chess move or where's the next spot fire to put out, or if I say this, what's the follow-on effects? So the actual cognitive load of being in those environments are exhausting, and that's where we start getting to burnout. So the more we can show up to all of our relationships with a value exchange, even if you're a CEO, I call that position the Chief Empowerment Officer. You're there to empower your team. So how do you show up and give to your team? And then your team in return works out how they can give back to you. And again, going to when I was a CEO, one of my first year apprentices, and she was really struggling in her early stages, and I was mentoring her a little bit and everything like that. And she actually won like a prize of a whole bunch of tools and a coffee cup. And she knows I like drinking coffee. So she came to me and she's like, I don't have much to give to you, but I know you like drinking coffee and I won this coffee cup and this prize, so I'd like to give it to you. And I think that's just such a beautiful example of that was very valuable to her. She won this prize because of her skills at trade school and everything like that. So that coffee cup had meaning to her, and she recognized I like drinking coffee, so she wanted to gift me something that added value to my life. And that's where you can very much see from an apprentice to a CEO, there was a value exchange there.
We've talked about that in terms of one person to another, or maybe within a team in a company, but how does that start to inform culture, including what kind of treatment or respect or value you're going to expect from clients or others in the industry versus I will do whatever it takes to win a job at any cost. I will be a sycophant to the client. A lot of those same dynamics play out outside of the firm, but clearly have a negative impact on the culture and then the individuals.
Yes, with a lot of my clients, I work with exactly this space. What is your ideal client avatar? And just as you bring your employees on an onboarding program of what's your company's values, what good behavior looks like in your organization, you do an onboarding process with an employee when you identify that employee is a fit for your company. It's doing the exact same for your client. So what is an ideal client for that company, not just financially, but in values alignment, in communication styles? And then when you're onboarding that client, set those clear expectations. This is our company values. We're so excited to work with you because we see alignment in X, Y, and Z with your company values. This is our expectations around communication, around thingamajiggies, et cetera, and actually put a little bit of time up front in setting clear expectations when you onboard that client, not just paperwork of how do we pay it and our payment terms are 30 days, but actually the expectations of the relationship and what you're going to give and how you're going to show up, and tell your client, please hold us accountable. This is what you expect from us. This is what we want you to hold us accountable to, but this is what we expect from you, and this is what we're going to hold you accountable. And again, it's that even, respectful exchange.
Yeah, when we were talking earlier, you referred to the idea of quoting to the bottom. And when you do that, you are trying to just be the low-cost leader. And now you've taken all the value out of the exchange and made it all about price.
Exactly. And that often then turns into a very stressful project for the client, a very stressful project for your team, and you're not going to get the quality of work. So when I was always talking to clients, I said, you've got three options. It's price, quality, and speed. So you could have low price and poor quality with no speed. You could have speed and good quality with a higher price. What's the three dynamics that is the most important to you? Looking at quality, speed, and price. And when I talk to my clients about that, no one really went to price. They're like, well, if we can have really good quality at a quick time, what's that going to cost us? Then all of a sudden you flip the conversation of going, we're going to come with you quality and speed that comes at a price. And you get them actually going and choosing which of those three pillars is the most important to them. And that reflects back to your client avatar. If they hone in on price and say, well, price is the most important thing for me and speed, you can then push back and say, well, that results in us pushing our team too hard, too quick. We don't do poor quality work. So at a cheap cost and expecting it fast, you're going to get poor quality. And that's not something that we deliver on. So we decline to quote on this job.
Now, that's a very empowering stand to take versus I have to take whatever comes my way because what if the next thing doesn't come along quickly enough?
Yeah. And it's a very scary moment to take. And the interesting thing is it really shifts the power dynamic with the client, because then the client's all of a sudden like, what do you mean you're not going to quote on my job? And it's if you stand and say, we prioritize quality and speed to make sure we're meeting it on your deadlines, and then that comes at a price. So if you are prioritizing cheapness, we're not going to be the right people for you, because that's our two priorities, quality and speed. And you'll often see the clients really start to change their mindset of like, well, yeah, I obviously want a good quality job that's done on time too. What are you talking about? So it's really interesting. If you have that courage to come with that conversation and really push back on that price time, there's been many times that a client has walked away, but then come back and gone, well, actually, now that I've looked at the other quotes and you've put that seed in my mind about quality and speed, I'm really concerned that, yes, it might be a cheaper price, but it's going to go 6 months longer, or the quality of the equipment that they're quoting on putting on this job is going to break down in 2 years' time. I'm going to have to replace it anyway.
Big problem in our industry is it's all about first cost. And there's not that equation of value because, of course, you have to maintain whatever you have built. And you also have to think about how it affects the productivity of the people using the space.
Exactly. And that's another good way to position the conversation when you're coming to price, is show the long-term maintenance cost of a poor quality product versus a good quality product. And then the different issues that you can have if you're rushing a job and everything like that. So I would always go, that's fine, you can do the job quicker, but these are the risks if you do the job quicker of X, Y, and Z going wrong. And if X, Y, and Z goes wrong, that actually exposes you to a whole bunch of liability and all of these different things. So at the end of the day, if you want to go cheap and fast, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road to when you sail into a really expensive problem.
Just unfortunately, sometimes a client will say, well, then it's not in my silo anymore. So I don't care. My performance is judged as on time, on budget. So that's all I care about, which is leading to the next question. We know these dynamics exist in our industry. We've talked about some strategies to maybe take a stand or push back, but let's think about that future workplace that really is that supportive environment where people are making value-based decisions and they understand part of the value is that the people in that environment are thriving.
Mhm.
What does that iteration of the workplace start to look like?
For me, this is really starting to see us address the mental health challenges we're seeing out there as well, which is costing organizations, society, everything, so many different issues from financial to emotional labor and emotional hardship as well. And we spend so much time of our lives at work. So if we can create our workplaces where we're actually teaching humans the skills to thrive, teaching humans the skills to be able to cope with adversity in a positive way. And that's not around toxic positivity of like, I'm fine, I can do this. That is about in the moments where life is crushing you, taking a moment to give yourself grace, to understand that you are strong enough to get through the other side of this challenge. And even this shall pass. And when it passes, you'll have learned something about yourself. The more we can teach that in our organizations, the more people can take that to their home environments, improve their home environments, which means that they're coming back to work in a better state. Because if they are not sleeping well or they have issues at home, and they have nowhere to rest between a very difficult work environment and a difficult home environment, of course, that person is going to burn out and eventually snap somewhere. So I see organizations, we have a social license to operate as an organization in community. And that comes with the responsibility of making sure we're investing in the human beings to thrive.
That would be a beautiful experience, right? To go into a workplace that truly was invested in you thriving, understanding that that's when they're also going to get the best work out of you, and that the work you're doing is going to be to the highest and best use of the people that consume that work in whatever way that they do.
Yeah.
A lot of this is about being able to articulate need, though, because we can't always expect that people are going to read the tea leaves of whatever's going on in our life. I find that women, especially in our industry, boundaries are not really a thing. You're never supposed to say no. And saying no means that you aren't cooperative, you're not a team player. There's all these negative connotations that get put on when we have a boundary. So, how can we get better at that?
In the coaching I've done with particularly women in boundary setting is again clear communication. So if someone comes to me with another request, you don't necessarily shut it down. How I coach people to deal with that, saying, yeah, I can definitely help you with that. Here is my priority list of the 5 things that I'm working on. I only have capacity to work on that. So which one would you like to take off my plate? Can we do a trade? Is there something that you've got a better skill set in one of my projects? So you do that and I'll take that off your plate. Or which one would you like me to put in the car park to take on this project? So you're putting the accountability on the person that's requesting more of you to actually make a decision. I'm at full capacity, more than happy to help you, but helping you looks like either you taking something off my plate or you giving me authority to car park something so then I can prioritize your task and helping you. And then that again shifts the dynamics of like, I'm not saying no, I'm being cooperative, but I'm at max capacity. So let's co-design what a solution looks like to be able to help each other out. And often that person will sometimes go, all right, well, I'll just do it myself and they'll back off. Or if they truly don't have the skill sets, they might do a task trade, or they might say, look, I'll go get sign off to see if you can push that task that you mentioned, because this is a priority for the client. So let me go up to upper management or wherever I need to get you the sign off to push that task to the car park side. So then the accountability is on that person to make whatever they're asking of you happen.
I love that. That really flips the script on a lot of things because, I think we've all been raised in a workplace culture that is very hierarchical and where if you want to get ahead, you have to check the boxes and you have to hit the milestones. And you certainly need to make sure that from whatever metric your performance is being judged, which is usually highly subjective, that you're making people happy. I love the way that that dynamic shifted to where it's not about giving up accountability, but it's really about having power and saying, this isn't a realistic ask. And let's talk about why.
Yeah. And let's work out how we get to a solution together. So that's where you're holding your boundary of the capacity of what you can take on, but in a very, I'm flexible of what we do with my capacity if it's really important that I take this on. But that's again, if you hold your ground like that and you've become the dumping ground because you've been the people pleaser, all of a sudden people will go, it is too complicated to ask her or him to do it because she's going to make me work out what tasks that I have to do, or I'm going to have to do it. It's just too difficult to ask her to do it. So if people are actually dumping on you, by setting up that framework, they'll stop the dumping because it's too much of work for them to navigate that conversation with you because they're not truly there with, I actually need your help. It's more, I just can't be bothered doing this. And she always said yes.
Yeah, one thing I would often notice, and sometimes it was with clients, sometimes it was within the firm, is somebody giving you a lot to do at the very last minute. And that didn't have to be that way, right? They could have been more organized. They could have asked you to do the same thing 3 days earlier or whatever. But because of their own, whatever reason, not being organized enough, now you are suffering for that. But when you push back, now they start to realize, oh, I can't take for granted that she's always going to get it done, no matter how impossible the situation is.
And you end up getting a lot more respect than trying to just constantly prove yourself by taking on more than you can do. And it will also start to highlight, is the team under-resourced? Is this a reoccurring problem? And then all of a sudden, the person that can't offload the task, they're like, well, this is way too much for me to do. You're at full capacity. We've car parked 3 tasks that we're working on to get this project onto the client. Maybe we actually truly need a new resource. So that's where I coach people that are very much people pleasing, and there's men and women that are people pleasing. You're actually doing a massive disservice to that organization because you're potentially hiding a resourcing problem that's going to stop that organization from growing. You're actually not helping anything. You're putting a band-aid over a bullet hole. So that's the other good thing with leaders. If you can hold your boundary like that and they start seeing all of these tasks build up, well, we need maybe another admin person or a part-time whatever drafter or something, because the tasks that keep getting pushed are of a certain type. So let's look at recruiting for someone that can take on that workload, even part-time or casually or something like that.
I never thought about that, but when you actually have to choose, there starts to be a pattern in what gets deprioritized, and that's telling you something too. Now, you mentioned proving yourself, and I think a lot of times, women especially, or people who feel in any way a minority in the workplace, think that proving themselves will make them more powerful, that the two things are connected. What I heard you just say is that that's actually the opposite.
It is. First of all, it creates subconscious distrust. You're trying to prove yourself by being a woman in a man's world and trying to act like the men or perform like the men or lead like the men. Subconsciously, people are like, something's not right here. And that can create subconscious distrust. And then defensive behaviors start getting put in place because a subconscious threat is identified. So as soon as we betray ourselves, and often when we're trying to prove ourselves, we're betraying who we authentically are, which is not healthy for our own psychological well-being, but subconsciously, you're actually activating defense behaviors from other people because they can sense a threat because something doesn't feel right. So the more you try and perform and act to prove yourself, the more self-fulfilling prophecy that you're creating, because people don't trust what's happening, nor should they, because you're not being real. You're not being something that deserves to be trusted.
Oh, I love that answer. That is just such a great way to think about it. And I've really enjoyed our talk. Real quickly, I wanted you to talk about your book and what is the $1 billion blind spot?
Everything that we've been talking about, it is the silent psychological tax that is created from poor workplace culture and leaders that haven't been taught human leadership skills. They might have been taught how to lead a project, how to quote a project, how to review a project, but they haven't actually been taught how to invest in the human side of it. So the more we build workplace cultures on financial metrics and all of those kind of stuff, and the less we actually look at the human metrics and building psychological success, we just erode our profit margins.
But it's a hidden cost because it's an indirect cost.
Exactly. My background's accounting, so it is hidden to a point, but when you start looking at the numbers, for example, overtime, if there's a lot of overtime, why is that happening? Is the team tired and they are being worked too hard? Is there a process that's slowing down the work that's making that overtime happen and the team's really frustrated because they're trying to do the job as quick as possible, but the technology is actually not letting them get through the job? So the overtime's happening, but that's creating frustration. Again, there's different metrics around looking at absenteeism, turnover rate, all of these different things. Often the numbers on people's P&Ls and balance sheet, they just glance over. But I really encourage people to go deeper and understand what's the story behind that number. Where did that number come from? How is that number being produced? Why is that number changing up or down? And really understand the storytelling behind the number, and then you'll start to see what your culture is actually costing you.
Wow, that's brilliant. So everyone should go out and get your book. How is it available?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Great. And then if people would want to work directly with you or book you as a speaker, how can they do that?
So my website is haciaatherton.com. Same on LinkedIn, Hacia Atherton on LinkedIn. And then I've got my Instagram as well. So across those 3 platforms, you'll be able to get in contact with me.
And we will put that in the show notes, everyone. So if you want to get Hacia's book or continue the process of working with her or having her come and speak for your organization, you'll have the links right there. Thank you again for being such an incredible guest. We are going to be airing this episode during Women in Construction Week, which is the first week of March. I think it is a perfectly timed message as well.
Yes, and what a fantastic week to celebrate all of the brave and courageous women that are making their way in the world's most male-dominated environment, but also for all of the courageous men that are doing what they can do to make space, to support these women, to mentor these women, to open up the doors for these women. It's amazing to see that the yin and yang of when an empowered woman empowers a man, and when an empowered man empowers a woman, things really change.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for bringing consciousness to these issues and, really showing us that it's not that hard to do. You just have to be aware of the old patterns and choose to do something different.
Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for listening. If you want even more content, head on over to architectingpodcast.com and subscribe to my newsletter and get some great free downloads while you're there. Be sure to follow me on social media. On Instagram at Architecting Podcast, Facebook and LinkedIn pages are Architecting, and the YouTube channel Architecting Podcast. Stay inspired.